benefit of going to clerk for this judge or that justice or going to that law office. In fact, when we came out of law school, LaSalle Street wouldn't even rent blacks office space. And we remembered those things. And we were happy that the good Lord in his infinite wisdom saw fit to put us in a position to do something about those evils in our society. And Harold addressed them and did the best he could to eradicate them.
What I did was deliberately, calculatedly, chose an area, a vehicle that I thought I could do some good. That vehicle was the Democratic Party, I thought, for several reasons. One, my people were in the Democratic Party. I didn't put them there. They went there because they felt the same way I felt. But here represents a vehicle through which we can do some social advancement and better our life. Same reason other people make decisions. Not in terms of the best, but in terms of what is available and based on their judgment, which appears to them to be the best. So I entered it. But I have always maintained this feeling about that party. I am not loyal to a structure. I am loyal to people, and I'm loyal to an organization to the extent that it is fair to people.
He started moving up the elective ladder by state rep, state senator. He had an independent streak, but no way was he part of the original reform movement in Chicago, as small and as insignificant as that was.
I was a corporation counsel for 4 years in the city of Chicago. I was a secretary to Congressman Metcalf when he was alderman. I worked in the Metropolitan Sanitary District as a junior attorney. I spent my whole life in city government and city politics.
I was Washington's campaign manager when he ran for state representative in the 60s. And we had a big party for him and invited Mayor Daley out, who in those days didn't come out on Sundays. I think this party was on a weekend. And he came out to wish Harold Washington well.
He was not a guy who ran in PACs, social groups, and he would disappear at times. And our relationship was kind of amazing because in the office sometimes we were there 8, 9 o'clock at night. And sometimes on the weekend, on Friday nights, especially all night long. Maybe I shouldn't. We had a friendly poker game, and we would sometimes be there all night.
And Washington was single at the time. He had been married, or he was married, but he was living single. And he knew a lot of people, and we went to a lot of parties in those days. And eventually I fell into the marriage fold, and that somewhat stopped, but we always worked politically together.
When I first met Harold was not the role model he was in the 80s. In the latter 60s, early 70s, Harold had some serious problems. He had had a major accident, almost cost him his life, almost cost him the lives of others. He decided in 1970, 69, never to drive again. So we became fast friends because I drove for him from 69 through 82.
He failed to file taxes for approximately 5 years. He was not evading taxes, he just didn't file.
But he was not a man who did not pay taxes. Harold's income was the legislature.
In any event, he let 5 years of taxes go, where the whole net difference was, I think, $500, between $500 and $1,000. And when they called him in on this, he could have avoided jail. He could have avoided serious conflict. All he had to do was appear once or twice, plead forgetfulness, exhibit some remorse, but the kind of stubbornness that was Harold, that was his blessing and his flaw, went to work there, and out of stubbornness, Harold virtually caused the judge to put him in jail.
I don't walk down the street with a sign on my back saying I didn't file income tax returns for certain years, nor do I slip through the night from shadow to shadow like a thief because of it. I paid the penalty for it. Judge Perry, when he sentenced me, said this to me, and I'll never forget it. And I think it bears here because it's not a special plea, it comes from a dispassionate person, one who heard all the facts. And he said to me, he said, I know your record, the same record you've read. You are a man who have dedicated yourself to public service. And from what I see, what has happened here that you work so hard and assiduously at your chosen field that you have failed to and been neglected in your own personal affairs. He says, it's tragic. He says, it's something you can rectify.
If he had shortcomings, I think he recognized those shortcomings in himself. And during those years that some people call the wild years, Harold didn't really want to step out front. But after I think he got better control of his life and had started focusing on a direction that he wanted to go to accomplish things himself, not just for himself, but for others, then he changed.
He represented the coming together of two strains in the development of African American politics in this country. You traditionally had the civil rights activists who stayed away from elective office, who didn't really participate. They were activists, they were community leaders, they were very often preachers. They stayed outside of the elective realm. Then you had those who more often than not had nothing to do with the civil rights agenda, who were there to parlay favors and play the patronage games and be part of the machine. These two tracks had been parallel over time. Harold broke that parallel and brought those two tracks together.
When he became state representative, that was an electrifying event. But by the time he became a senator, and he began to play a major role in our lives.
Through most of his career in the legislature, he went along with the traditional machine issues. He was very consistent, though, on the civil rights issues and the black-related issues.
Washington earned a record as a smart, often inspired legislator. After the death of Mayor Richard J. Daley in 1976, he ran for mayor, coming in third in a four-person race and winning only 5 black wards. In 1980, he ran for Congress and won.
He was not a man who took on a lot of quixotic campaigns. And I think he ran in '77 understanding he was going to lose by, some substantial amount, barring a miracle. But understood that historically at that time, the way blacks got to be mayors of big cities was to run and lose and then run again.
That experience became an underlying factor for the later run.
Besides a consummate campaigner, he was also a consummate legislator. He really loved the legislative process. He was in Congress, he'd gone there, had made an impact right away. The kind of tradition at the time was congressmen usually only got 2 assignments to committees. Because of his experience in the General Assembly, they gave him 3. And the other thing that was happening was the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act. They gave Harold the charge of being the leader and getting and building support for the Voting Rights Act around the country.
He knew the subject matter, and he was able to really be persuasive on the floor. If anybody reads the congressional record, he was a master. I mean, he studied it like a constitutional expert.
He left the Congress in the first few months and began to campaign. He said at that time, he was thanking his constituency for having elected a congressman. But when in fact, what we were doing was organizing for the mayoralty. He started, as you'll be proud to know, by going to laundromats. We did laundromats on Cottage, on King, on State, and Harold spent all his mornings going to laundromats thanking females, when in fact we're launching the mayoralty.
Back home in Chicago, Mayor Jane Byrne had lost the loyalty of African American voters. Political activist Lou Palmer was promising "we shall see" in '83. At the grassroots, the conditions were right for Harold Washington to lead a crusade.
Jane Byrne, from the moment she was elected mayor of the city of Chicago in 1979 in an upset, she assumed that someday Richard M. Daley was going to try to take her job from her. And she was obsessed with that. She was focused on Richard M. Daley as the only candidate that was ever going to wrest the mantle from her. And so she did things like kicking African Americans off the school board and putting on representatives of the northwest and southwest sides in Chicago, not known for their racial tolerance, to replace blacks that had been kicked off the school board. She did